guys came over from Steve's channel because you want to know what this Performer X dual plane / single plane intake manifold is actually going to do. How well is it going to perform? Well, that is going to answer the questions for you guys. I know he ended up putting it up as a short, but this video, my friends, you're going to get the whole enchilada. Let's get into this little scream machine. The day has come. I have been sworn to secrecy that I could not give any of this away for porting the heads, porting this intake. That's good old Performer X over there. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But this thing is absolutely awesome. I'm sure you guys have seen a little bit of the buildup that Kyle and Steve have been doing on this thing. Oh, this is the screen machine. This is going to be absolutely kick butt. And what I did was a set of Motown 220s, ported them out, ported a Performer RPM intake, and that one over there. We'll get at end of the video. We'll get into all the details of what I did. But the exciting part is it's finally up to dyno. If you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of lowdown of what was done inside the short block, because that is more magic than anything else.
It is quite fancy, if I do say so myself. It is very elaborate. So this started life as a Dart little M block. It's been way lightened out. The cam tunnel has been sealed off, so that's what this oil pickup line is here that goes down to our dry sump system. There's actually a pickup tube in here that picks up oil out of the valley. So it's a separate oil system between the top end and bottom end. Yeah, so ultra lightened block. This is 310 cubic inches. It is a custom Crowder crankshaft, custom CP rods, custom CP pistons. The pistons that are in this thing, and interesting though, is that when I was working with Richard Batchelor over there at CP with designing this piston, this is the most amount of compression and the most amount of dome that you can possibly have with these cylinder heads. He said that he has never seen one with this much compression. So it's not crazy because it's such small cubic inches, such a small bore, but we're about 12.9 in compression, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a 310 cubic inch engine, you're not going to get more than that unless you go to like an SB2 head or something like that with a really small chamber. So
now on that, I know we can't give away the secret squirrel of the camshaft, but what about lift?
Lift, we're 720 on lift.
720 on lift. Oh yeah, we're making those frickin' heads work for sure. Now, I've heard about it of running a strapless plug.
Yes.
Would that even be a thought?
It could be a thought. It's just a matter of finding the correct part number and the correct heat range. That's something that we can try in the future, and that's probably something that I'll tell to the customer about the engine. Yeah. Because this, another note is that this carburetor and ignition system is actually not the one that's going to be going on in the car. This is just our dyno setup that we run on anything from a 305 to a 540 cubic inch big block. It's just our do-it-all carburetor, nothing fancy. So there's going to be a custom carb made for it. He's got some fancier stuff for ignition, and they're going to actually hub dyno this car when it's finished. So those are some things that we'll probably work over with him as far as like what plugs we think he should run instead of these ones, carburetor jetting, timing, things like that. But for the most part, the horsepower that we are seeing so far really impressed with. So I don't want to give it away right now.
Oh, not yet. Now, do you know how big this carb is? Is it like a 950 or something like that?
It's a 950 Holly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now how many people would sit there and go, you don't put a carburetor that big on a 302, you're out of your mind. When you're trying to spin 9,000 RPM out of something like this, you need as much air, fuel, everything, plus working on an intake that honestly is probably not the best thing to be trying to run, but it's all within these, what is it, spec 6?
Yeah, SVRA Group 6.
Now with that, with the cylinder heads, you cannot have any raised intake, no raised exhaust ports. These are a straight plug cylinder head. This is as close to OEM as we could get, and the intake manifold has to be a kickback or a throw off of the original dual plane intake manifold that like a 69 Z28 would have or something like that. This is within the rule books, but they didn't say we couldn't play around and weld and epoxy and do other stuff. So guys, I'm excited for this one. We'll show you this here in a little bit. But that's the lowdown on the motor. I hope you guys dig it. And like I said, we'll get into more of what did I do on the heads and the intake and all that. We'll do it at the end. And I am so excited for this thing. So let's go look at some dyno numbers because they've already done a couple of rips on this. And we're going to switch the intake over to this Performer X intake. I ended up milling everything out and I turned this bad boy into a single plane intake. That is going to be interesting. I guarantee about everybody that I've talked to on this has said the same thing. I've always wanted to do that. Is it going to work? I don't know.
I was telling my dad earlier, it's gonna do one or two things. It's either going to not work at all or it's going to work great.
Hit me down in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking. They ended up running the first intake manifold that just has a divider's been taken out of it. And at that point, it's still a regular Performer RPM and it's been thrown on there. Where is that at before we end up doing the swap over? Well, this thing is making pretty good power. You can definitely tell where that camshaft starts ripping and coming into play. And to see a dual plane linger out that far is absolutely amazing. So this has made 612 and 435 foot-pounds of torque. That is one bad little scream machine, I tell you what. And I can't wait to hear this thing spinning 9,000 RPM. This thing is gonna be absolutely amazing. I am gonna switch this Performer RPM to the Performer X intake manifold. Now, you guys saw it. This thing pretty much ended up making 613 horsepower with this intake. So we're gonna swap things around. Is it gonna actually improve and make a little bit more, or is it gonna completely shit the bed and make a bunch less? Carburetor's off. There is inside the plenum of the 613 horse one. Now you guys get a better idea of what exactly I did. I machined all of this out. Yeah. Now you come back over here and look at this. Now you're getting a little idea of the madness that I was doing here. Gosh, I hope this works. Here's what the inside of this thing looks like. Look at that. That is freaking machined jewelry. That is insane. I noticed they're off a little bit on, yeah, this needs to rise up. Port's a little off. The gasket must have shifted its way down. But I noticed this was sitting in the bottom. I gotta go find out what that is. Because just all of a sudden I pulled the intake off and this was kind of bouncing around. So let's see what this is. So what was that piece? Off the throttle. Yep. Must have spun off when I pulled the intake off. That made my heart skip a beat.
What?
This right here was inside the valley.
Ugh.
I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, and I'm looking at it going, I don't know where this came from. So I showed him, he's looking at it going, oh, wait a minute, it's just this piece. My heart skipped a beat. So did you just have one closed off so far?
Wasn't closed all the way.
One.
Yeah, it's closed up the gap, but not shut it off.
Hmm.
I might be a little big on gap too.
Was that 3 or 5? 3?
3.
3?
There's the problem child from before. That's okay. All right.
Mm-hmm. All right, she is all bolted down, ready to rock and roll, my friends. Here we go. And what's funny is, if I can actually get a light in there, you can shine it all the way down and actually see the cylinder head intake port on that one and that one. You normally can't do that with a dual plane intake manifold. So we just got to wrap up, get the carburetor put on, throw some water back in it, and we're going to light this bad boy off. We're making some noise, everything's on. Steve is just setting timing, and we're going to see how this intake works out. We officially made the same horsepower as an original 302.
So far, it looks pretty good.
Woo-hoo!
Let's take that carburetor off and see if all that epoxy fell out of it.
Yep.
It no longer runs.
Yeah, I can say that's running terrible. That's weird. let me just say, and you might have heard Steve say this many, many times, no bueno.
Did something.
This right here is a definition of no bueno.
Yeah, so the red line is previous with the other manifold, 613. This is now new line. So we are, you know, let's look at the table here, see what's going on. Oh, that's interesting. It pulls a bunch of freaking fuel and didn't start getting cleaned up till the end. So it is pulling fuel. For sure.
That's got to be because of just the larger plenum in that sense.
I don't know.
But I can answer the question
not,
people might have of...
Not drastically different. I mean, 12.2 to 12.3.
Yeah, if you cleaned up that fuel, would it make a big difference? No.
Not that much difference.
No, absolutely not. It is not going to make that kind of difference.
That is 100 horsepower down.
Yeah, I mean, your torque.
So it is really unhappy somewhere.
Yeah.
Really unhappy somewhere. Yeah, 435. Yeah, it is down 110 foot-pounds of torque.
And peak torque was at 7,900. Yeah, yeah.
It's just because I was winding up. It was just something that was, something unhappy. That is really interesting.
All right, you guys, we are into the meat and potatoes of this. What did I do to the cylinder heads? What did I do with those intake manifolds? And on my end of it, building the top end, how did we produce basically 2 horsepower per cubic inch with this bad boy? Well, this is how we did it. Now, I want to say this before we start. I had videos of doing all the head porting and the intakes and all that stuff. Guys, I ended up doing this stuff back in November. And I was pretty much sworn to secrecy that I could not show any videos, do anything because of the collaboration on this with Steve. And he didn't want me to spoil anything for you guys out there. So doing that, I am limited on how much storage I have in my phone when I'm making videos for my channel, and I was running out of storage. So I kept all my pictures that I took, and that's what I'm going to show you guys right here. I can keep all the pictures that I took, but the videos, I'm sorry you guys, I don't have them anymore, but there's still enough here where you're going to get the idea of what's going on. So let's start with the cylinder heads. Now on the cylinder heads, these are a set of Motown 220s. It's a 208 1.6 with a 64cc combustion chamber. Straight, basic. But what we had to do was we had to have a cylinder head that was specific to OEM, meaning could not be raised intake, could not be raised exhaust ports, and it could not be angle plug either. So it had to be standard OEM style, cylinder heads like what you'd have back in 69 or 1970. There was only a couple of them out there that we could find. A set of Dart Sportsmans, bleh, a set of the Motown 220s, cha-ching, or the Dart Iron Eagle Platinum, like a 215 head. They don't make those anymore. So trying to even find a set was kind of hard. So instantly I said, okay, hey, order me up a set of the Motown 220. So we went from there. What I ended up having to figure out was, what kind of RPM are we spinning? 9,000. What kind of horsepower are we shooting for? 600. So I need these to be able to produce a good amount of CFM. And guys, keep in mind the flow numbers, they're one of many different things that help in tools of making this actually work. What's more important is things like my cross-sectional area on my short turn, where my push rod pinch is at, my throat, all of that is much more crucial in my measurements than whatever it actually peaks flow. If you do everything right, the head's gonna flow good, period. It's just gonna flow good. So that being said, let's go on the intake side of this. Knowing that it had to flow pretty well and the RPM, that for me is gonna be, like I said, my short turn cross-sectional area. Now, I couldn't raise the roof a whole lot, and I don't want to, because I knew we were going to be running over 700 lift on the camshaft, and there's going to be a good amount of spring pressure. I don't want to weaken it, plus the fact we're going to be spinning 9,000 RPM. I didn't want to get too crazy in there, so it was more blending. Well, how can I change that area? How can you do that? Well, what I did was, instead of trying to open up the top, I opened it up this way. So where my short turn was at, I actually opened up the sides a little bit more, brought that cross-sectional area in, so you can see that portion of it. Next is going to be more where RPM starts to play a little bit of game here, is going to be in my push rod pinch. So again, I'm only limited on a certain amount of height and a certain amount of width. But what you can do, and a lot of people don't do this, is your dead flat side that you have, where we're going around the push rod, well then you got this flat side. Where I'm at my tight point right in here, well, you can take this and slightly open it up. So instead of it going like this, right, this is where I'm going around my push rod, you would go like this and then come in. So right at that same spot, I'm pooched like this. That opens up my cross-sectional area. Even if it's a few thousandths, even if it's like 20 thousandths, well, think about it. If I did that 20 thousandths into the push rod, I'd be into the push rod, and then you're screwed. Now we're going into throat, and we're going into the bowl. The bowl is around 102%, and the throat I did at right around 92%. So at that point, it's everybody would, you know, some people go, oh, you can go more bowl than that. You can. This is where I figured everything was going to be in a very happy place. So doing that, it all worked out very, very well. And these heads ended up getting into the ballpark of right around, I believe they were like 328 at about 750 lift. So if you want to call it 330, you can call it 330. So they didn't do too bad. Now on the exhaust side, you'll see here where the cylinder head's sitting upright. So the floor is actually on the side. It's not at the very bottom. But you can see where I basically have 3 more rounded edges and 1 flatter edge. That flatter edge is that inside of the cylinder. I didn't have to worry about it that much, so I left it more flat and put more emphasis on that outer edge. You can see that in there. And then on the exhaust side as well, I don't worry too much about bowl size. I pretty much worry about the throat. And at that point, I was right around 90. I know some people, man, you can go more than that. I put it at 90. And then from that point, I just blended it in and then just worked the bowl. It was more manipulation of the short turns than anything else. Now, with those being done, that's where the cylinder heads are at. Combustion chambers, I just cleaned them up. I made sure, you know, around the valves that there was no hot spots, anything like that. We had to have the combustion chambers stay as small as they possibly could because you guys know about the pistons. You're kind of limited. So we only had about 13-to-1 compression out of it. If I would have made them any bigger, we'd be losing compression. We need that compression to help with torque, with getting the RPMs up and all that stuff. So all of it worked out really, really well. Now on the intake manifolds, I actually did 3 intake manifolds. One was a regular Performer RPM that I didn't cut the divider out of, that I fully ported. Number 2 was the one that you saw made 613 horse. And that one, I basically cut the divider out of it and then ported it the same way I ported the other intake. I don't know why we didn't run the first intake. We could be limited on time. And then the Performer X, that was, even Steve didn't know I was building that one. I brought that in and showed it to him, and I'm like, look, I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to take a single plane intake, I've always wanted to take a dual plane intake manifold and turn it into a single plane. I always thought, man, if you got rid of that step, you know, could you make the plenum big enough to work with it? Now, keep in mind, here's the trick with this, or there's so many tricks with this. But one of the big ones is a single plane intake runner, they're gonna come up at the intake like this, right? When a dual plane does it, they do this and twist. So when they come up, they twist. So where you would be side by side, you're above and below. That makes a severe pain in the ass. Plus the fact that the runner itself now, instead of being, say, something that would be like this big here, it's like that big because they're above and below. You're sharing that same amount of volume. So if you don't have a runner that's very big, that's why they make so much torque, to be able to get it to produce that upper end of RPM, well, then we have to add more plenum volume. If you keep the divider, now this is where my brain went, if you pretty much keep the divider, you're always running this side with the top, this side with the bottom. Well, as cylinders fire, you can never use the air that's over on this side. So that's a limiting factor. So you cut the divider out, you get more plenum. So it's gonna help with supporting a much more RPM. You guys could see that just cutting out the divider on the 613 horsepower motor, the one that everybody ended up betting on. And with the increase in plenum volume, my hope was that it would pick up even more in that upper RPM range and maybe even support it higher than what the other intake was, where it peaked at like, what was it, 8,000 or 8,100, to where it would peak even farther than that and produce even more power. Will it work? I didn't know. So it was one of those things where it's like, I always wanted to make one of these intake manifolds. So with this intake, what I did was I milled everything out, cut it all out, just threw it on a mill, cut it all out. At that point, you could see on the bottom side where I protruded through, where I'm going, oh crap, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of work here. Well, then I ended up making these pieces of aluminum. So I ended up having one for the floor, and then I ended up doing one to cover up that hole that I had. And from there, I just set everything inside there. You can see how it looks nice. Everything turned out good. Then from that point, we ended up fully welding everything in, and then I just epoxied everything and just blended it all together, how you guys saw in the video, how I ended up having it all finished before I put the intake on the motor. And that, my friends, was, there's a little more trickery in it, but that's pretty much the meat and potatoes of it. It did allow me, once I milled everything out, to be able to really get inside those ports and try to open up, you know, those itty bitty little intake runners. It allowed me to open them up about as far as I possibly could. And you're limited where you can't get into that lower section at all because you have that step in the way. Well, now I don't have the step, so I actually had to use like an angle grinder with a porting bit on it and get inside there. Oh, it was a pain in the butt. It was an absolute pain in the butt making this intake manifold. So that is how the Performer X ended up coming to light, and how it produced, you know, what it produced and how it performed, It was something fun. And even though every car guy that I showed it to, showing it to Steve, showing it to Kyle, and I'm like, what do you guys think? And everybody's like, I don't know. You know, it seems like it would work, but I don't know. And everybody seems so excited to see if it works. And this is all part of testing. If it doesn't work, well, where did you screw up at? How did you screw up? If it does work, well, then these are the ways that it actually made it perform better. Okay, so the conclusion of the Performer X, I don't even want to put Performer in it. The dual plane, switching it and making it a single plane intake manifold, it's garbage. It's an absolute piece of crap. I mean, 100 horsepower drop.
Total turd 2.0.
So if any of you guys want the intake, was it 100 foot-pounds of torque too? That was dropped? It was
110.
Oh, guys, that was bad. But we all wanted to know, if you did that, what would it do? And it wouldn't do good. So take out the divider, perfectly fine. Motor ended up making 613 horse, fully ported. I ported that all the way exactly the same. The only difference was I made it the single plane. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just do what we did here, and you'll be A-okay. She'll work perfectly fine for you. So I appreciate it. I was glad to be able to come out and be a part of this thing. I know the customer's going to be super happy for this little Minnie Mouse screaming machine. This thing's a bad unit, you guys, for sure. So till we meet again, my friends, I will see you on the next one.